So, Father God, we acknowledge you as the sovereign of the universe, the God that made us, the God that saved us, the God that loves us. And we ask, Lord, as we meet to talk about young people and to talk about missions, we ask that you would make us better at what we do for you. You would soften our hearts that we could love you more, that you would pour your Spirit out through us, that the young people under our care would fall in love with you. So to your glory. Amen. Amen. Okay, so the workshop is about raising youth ministry awareness and interest in your youth groups. And I'm going to ask you guys to introduce yourselves in just a second. But before I do that, let me do some sort of housekeeping-y things. Okay, so the organization, I made an announcement this morning. How many people saw my announcement with my tear-jerking video? Okay, the organization that I was talking about is called the Young Anglicans Project. We are in the process, okay, good, of putting sort of, well, anyway, it's an organization dedicated to try to put the church's interest and attention back on young people. If you would like to be part of our mailing list, I'm going to pass this around. And it's not a huge deal. We don't do more than 2 or 3 emails a day, so it's not like we're going to be spamming you. But if you are interested in being a part of that, please print very clearly, but give us your email address and we'll put that on that list. Announcement number 1. Announcement number 2. One of the things that is happening next June is the bishop wants to have another provincial gathering. So that's going to happen in Pittsburgh, and we're going to be doing a provincial youth gathering. Provincial youth gathering, PYG. It just makes me laugh that it's pig, and it really does. If you would take one of these to the youth people that are in your church or responsible for your church, I would love to have them passed out widely. It's sort of a save the date thing. So it's in Pittsburgh next June. Advertisement number 2. What is advertisement number 3? Advertisement number 3 is my handout, and I'm really thrilled that I've got enough to do these. I started doing youth ministry in a big youth ministry room with a big ceiling fan in the middle. And the most fun way to pass out stuff was to take it and just throw it right into the... Oh, sometimes it fails. And it's like, without a ceiling fan, it's harder, but sometimes you can still make it work. This is the little flyer that I will be referring to some as we're doing this. I need to sort of confess to you guys that we've got the flyer, and the flyer doesn't have many notes about what I'm going to be talking about. Those would have been on a PowerPoint presentation, but I was given the choice between making the workshop easier for you or getting filmed and put on TV, and you guys lost. Okay, so we're filming the workshop, and that's hard for them to do video. Okay, so announcement number 4. Here is a flyer for an organization that does short-term mission trips called Gateway Mission Training Center. They've got a booth, actually, that's right next to the Young Anglicans booth. If you're interested in doing this, I've got this. Well, actually, we can just pass these around. So you could just grab one and pass it around. If you're at all interested, yeah, there you go. Yes, all right. Good. I love to see people learning and applying what they've learned in workshops.
I didn't have the courage.
Okay, so then, final announcement is this is actually the nonprofit that I work for. We do youth ministry training. We have internship programs. We are right now recruiting for our post-college internship program. So it's a program called Border Fellows. And what we're trying to do is help young Christian people coming out of colleges figure out how to integrate their faith in their work. So, you know, it's real easy for people that come out and say, I really love Jesus and I want to serve Him, so I'm going to go be a leader in the church. Well, what about people that come out of college and say, I really feel like I'm supposed to be an accountant or a Christian lawyer? Yeah, that's right. No, that could never happen. But maybe they were going to be accountants. And so try to help them understand what it means to be a Christian accountant or a Christian lawyer or a Christian whatever. So it's a great program. It's 1 year. It's in here where it talks about training. It's the Border Fellows program. So if you're interested, if you have somebody that's coming out of college and might be interested, let me know because we've got more information. And I think that that is the last shameless plug. Okay, I think what I would like to do, if you guys are willing, is just go around real quickly and have everybody introduce themselves. And this is what I would like to know. I would like to know your name. I would like to know where you are right now. Location, name of church, whatever. I would like to know your involvement with kids, your involvement with teenagers, and your involvement with missions. So everybody sort of think about what you're going to say, because I don't want to have lots of O's and ahs, because this is my workshop. Right? And it's my turn, that's right. I don't want to waste time with you guys talking. So anyway, so briefly, name, where you're from, involvement with kids, involvement with missions, so we can sort of understand what to do with the workshop. So are you willing to start?
Yes.
Okay.
Solomon Kesiga from Uganda and the Bishop Stuart University.
Okay.
So I'm dealing with kids.
Okay.
Well, they are not kids.
College age,
Yes,
yeah.
they're college age. And I guess my mission is expressed in offering them education at that level.
Okay. Okay.
My name is Father Patrick, and I'm currently at a church in Virginia. Looking to be at a church in Maryland because I just moved to Maryland. I used to run a big youth group, 40 members, and then I started another one that was 30. And the last time I was involved with youth was 10 years ago, or like 8 years ago, 2004. 2005 was my last year. And became a priest, and used to do mission trips, and then I became a priest. And so now I'm looking at wanting to get back to getting out of kind of my direction and look to go back into youth ministry.
Okay, good.
And,
smart man, good.
Yeah, so, and start back doing mission trips again.
Excellent.
So, but when you have that process of becoming a priest, it doesn't leave much time for anything.
Right. Yeah, go ahead.
Steve Primmel from Glendora, California. St. Luke's La Crescenta is where I go. And my involvement is mostly through mission trips, actually, and through the desire to see the young people in Malaysia, particularly on the island of Borneo, be able to defend their faith against Islam. That's my major.
Okay, yeah.
Hi, I'm Constance McDearman from St. Stephen's Anglican Church in Eastville, Virginia on the Northern Neck. And I'm a youth leader in our church. I have taken kids on numerous mission trips to the Dominican Republic. We have an active ministry there. And we take year after year trips there with kids. We have the kids are very active in a mission ministry already. There.
Okay, cool, very cool.
Looking for new ideas.
Okay.
So you come in late, you get to sit up front. And you got to sit by the priest too. That's
Yeah.
a penalty.
I'm Megan Skelly. I'm from Christchurch, Austin.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, how exciting. Okay.
I'm Jack and Donna Wheatley's daughter.
Oh, that's why you look familiar. Okay. Okay, great.
So Christchurch, Austin, and I'm not involved in youth ministry, but I have 2 kids, and so I'm very interested in youth ministry. Have done a lot in missions, and am one of the members of our team from the mission team from Christchurch here.
Okay, oh, that's so exciting. It's so good to have you here. Yes.
I'm Gary Clark from Christchurch in North Atlanta. Kennesaw, Georgia. Okay.
Now wait, I'm guessing that maybe you guys are married? Is that?
Nah.
No, okay, okay.
My wife's not here. Our pastor asked us to be more involved, asked us that we look for ways to more involve our youth in our church. And my first suggestion of tying them up didn't fly. So she asked my wife if she would have any better idea. And we had an opportunity to represent an organization that sent us to China to come here and represent the organization. And that gave us a dual ability to satisfy that, as well as satisfy needs at our own church.
Okay.
Did I miss anything?
I think not.
Okay. It's your turn.
It's my
You
turn.
can correct him now. Yeah.
No, he did fine.
Okay, he did fine. Okay. Okay, we were just introducing
Oh, I'm
ourselves.
Bonnie
Bonnie,
Clark.
okay.
I said who I was. I forgot that part. Let me see.
I thought you were just
Yeah, that's all
shy.
right.
I thought you didn't want to say. Okay. Okay. Just doing name, where you're from, involvement in missions, and involvement with young people. Just real briefly.
I'm Robina Katwesige. I'm from Uganda, extreme west. Is it extreme west? No,
The real West.
the real west, yeah. The kingdom of Bunyoro Kitara. The diocese of Masindi Kitara.
Okay.
Our church, in fact, that's why I picked interest in this. Our church, it is a new diocese, but we haven't gone far in terms of mission.
Okay.
We do it locally, and I have been looking forward to having an opportunity and getting to learn how to minister to young people, because these are the people I dealt with sometime before I came to Trinity. I was having a parish, but I was wondering, I was like, hey, how do I begin and how do I convince these younger people who are going modern, who are like,
Right.
and they are rejecting every kind of church business, and so I was looking for an opportunity of how to minister to them.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
when I saw the workshop, I said I would be there.
Okay. 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 And so you're at
This guy's the perfect guy for you.
you're at Trinity School for Ministry right now? In Pictures. Okay.
I'm doing biblical studies.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Okay, okay. Well, this is an entirely different kind of group than the one that was here last time, and I hope that the material is interesting and useful, but it may not be. It's pretty much aimed at, well, anyway, let me go ahead and just say, if you have questions at any point, please interrupt me and ask them, especially because if this stuff is not helpful to you, I'd rather, go off in places that are helpful. So let me explain why I am up here leading this workshop. As far as I can tell, the main reason has to do with my physical beauty. Pretty much whenever I do workshops, the evaluations always give my workshops really high, grades. And well, I mean, look at this.
Is misrepresentation a negative?
No. If it's funny, not at all. No. Yeah, any evil that makes people laugh is fine. So anyway, coincidentally to my good looks, I've also been involved in youth ministry for most of my career. I've been teaching youth ministry for a while at Trinity School for Ministry. I've been leading youth, and I don't do that now, I did that for about 7 years, have been leading short-term trips for probably 30 years. Had spent a while with Gateway Mission Training Center that I talked about, these guys right here, where I was hosting short-term mission trips. My youth groups, for the most part, have been youth groups that raised up kids that went on to be missionaries. I'm really passionate about that. I really feel like that's one of the most important things that the church can be doing. So that's what we're going to be talking about. I really do believe that working with teenagers is where it happens in missions. I mean, bottom line, it just really is. That's the point that adolescence, that period between childhood and adulthood, is the place where people make the big decisions. Where people decide, who they're gonna marry, what their profession is going to be. They prepare for their profession, and to the point that we can plant a passion for missions inside the heart of an adolescent. We've got a whole life to devote to it. I'm pretty sure everybody has heard of Dwight L. Moody, the famous evangelist. At one point, he had just done an evangelistic crusade. And I mean, the story may be apocryphal, okay, but I'm going to tell it as though it really happened. So this is another one of those things, another thing that you can wrap deceit in that makes it okay. So Dwight Moody was asked how one of his crusades had gone, and he said it was great. We had 2.5 conversions. And the guy was listening to him and said, what on earth do you mean? How can you have a half a conversion? He said, oh, I get it. You had 2 adults and 1 young person give their lives to the Lord. And Moody said, no, 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 quite the opposite. We had 2 young people give our lives to the Lord and an adult give their life to the Lord. And the guy says, well, how can you count that as a half? He said, because half of the guy's life is already over. You know, these teenagers have got a whole life, a full life to devote to the causes of the gospel. And I feel like there's a really important lesson there for those of us that are passionate about missions. Young people have got a whole life to devote to the cause of the gospel in world missions. In a lot of ways, I think that people that work with young people are the premium mobile missionizers, that was good, mission mobilizers in the church. That this is where it happens, and really effective youth ministry should be moving people onto the mission field. So, with that as a foundation, I want to go through some sort of some theological issues and then get to some real practical issues. I'm going to tell you right now that the bottom line, as far as I'm concerned, is that to build up mission awareness in young people, you've got to get them out on the mission field. And my experience has been that that is so powerful and so valuable that it's not even worth talking about other ways to raise mission awareness. So I'm going to spend most of the time talking about why it's important, how you make it happen, how you pay for it. If that's not of interest to people, please redirect me. So, number 1, why are missions important for working with young people? Reason number 1, because God is calling His people to the nations. And God is calling His people to the nations. Now, I don't want to play like that's a new big surprise thing, because it's been happening, since Genesis. God has always been interested in the nations. I do want to say that there is something historically unique going on right now. And I would say that that is the short-term missions movement. So for about the last 50 years, there's been this amazing thing happen that, as far as I can tell, has never happened in the history of the world, that sends young people out of the boundaries of the country for some period of summers of the year. And the numbers have been unbelievable. I mean, through the 90s into the 2000s, it's like you're talking more than 1 million young people a year going outside the boundaries just of the U.S. You know, not even talking about the other countries in the world that are involved in this stuff. So God is doing something that is historically unique. If I am the steward of young souls, I have to be about getting my kids involved in the things that God is doing now. And if the Holy Spirit is moving kids to the nation, I want to have my kids involved in that. Reason number 2, because seeing the world's poverty breaks one of the biggest strongholds that the enemy has on American kids. I mean, because we are a rich country, because our country is set up on an economic system that values consumerism, our kids are just filled with it. I mean, they're soaked with it. They don't know any difference. There's a sense of entitlement among our kids. There's an overvaluing of our abundance of things. And there is no way to break that until they see that there's an alternative. So one of the most valuable things about missions is it allows people to see poverty in countries other than the U.S. When my oldest son was 8 years old, we went, so the talk that was given this morning, you know, you got the picture of the Brazilian dump with the people living on it. I took my 8-year-old to a dump, well, actually in Juarez. And, you know, it's the kind of thing where, you know, you've literally got families digging through the garbage to find food to eat. I was going with the ministry that would go out, you know, would set up tables, would feed kids. And so my 8-year-old kid, you know, we're setting up all the tables and stuff, and he gets fascinated by a dog, you know, that was sort of like a typical dump. I mean, you know, it's patches of fur that are missing, and it's all ribs, and it's mange, and it's this, you know, nasty dog that's never been fed. And my son's heart goes out to it, and he starts taking tortillas off the pile and feeding them to the dog. You know, this is a perfectly reasonable and compassionate thing for a middle-class white American kid to be doing, but totally inappropriate in this place where the families in the dump don't have any food at all. You know, how can you give the people's food to the dogs? So anyway, we stopped that. But we had him, we gave him a job, right? At this point you realize we've got to give the kid a job. And his job was going to be passing out a box of oranges. So he comes out with this box of orange at this place. We've got, kids playing games and stuff. The kids see the oranges coming out, and it's just faces lighting up, and they are lined up, and they are excited about oranges. And it's something that's like my son wouldn't even think about at home. But to all of a sudden see that the stuff we take for granted really matters to some people that really need it, it was life-changing. It's hard to ever look at oranges the same way again. That's something that all of our kids need to see. Now, I want to carefully separate missions from poverty. They're not synonymous. And I'll make that point more strongly in a minute. But one of the valuable things about taking our kids outside the boundaries of the U.S. is that they can see poverty that sometimes can break that stronghold. Reason number 3. Okay, so I am involved right now in an interminable dissertation for a PhD that I'll probably never get. But for the research, I've taken Anglican families, all of whose kids are out of the house and are faithful. Okay, so I'm sort of looking for families that have done it right. It's like all of their kids are following the Lord. And I've gone to the parents and I've said, what did you do that led to the faithfulness of your kid? And then talked to the kids and said, tell me how your faith developed, to see if they even talk about their parents. It's been absolutely fascinating for a bunch of reasons, but one of the things that keeps coming out of the kids' story is how powerful short-term missions have been to the kids. Just again and again and again, major breakthroughs happen when our kids are off on mission trips, to the point that I think it's one of the most valuable things that anybody who works with kids can do. The Great Commission has got this line at the end where Jesus says, he says, disciple the nations, and behold, I will be with you always. And I have really come to believe that somehow that promise is tied up with the command to go. That somehow when you go, when you honor that commandment of the Lord, He is there in a special way. And I've seen it dramatically change the lives of kids that are involved. Reason number 4. It convinces them that the world is a place that they can care about and function in. One of the terrible things that happens to our kids, and I'm sure it happens to kids all over the place, but our borders are so much further away from other countries that our kids don't have experience on the other side. Everything we hear about the world is scary, right? It's like you don't hear about people going to the store and buying crackers and then going and getting ice cream. You hear about bombs, you hear about shootings, you hear about wars, you hear about tsunamis wiping out whole villages. And it's really easy, especially for young people, to think, oh my gosh, I am so lucky that I live here where it's safe, rather than out there where everybody's life is always in danger. And it's not just an American problem, right? It's a problem for people who never get outside their national borders. The rest of the world always looks scary because that's all they hear about. It's helpful to get our kids outside because they understand that the people that live out there are people just like them. People who go to the store and people who buy ice cream and people that they could get to know. And the two things that are really important is to understand that no place in the world is really safe. And at the same time, the world is not as dangerous as it looks. So a while ago, I guess 5 or 6 years ago, I took a group of kids to Jordan. And it was one of those things where we made the mistake of praying, oh God, where should we take our kids? And He really answered. It was, one of those things that was so clear that we couldn't ignore it. And so we went to the church mission committee and we said, we think God wants us to go to Jordan. And they did exactly what any responsible mission committee vestry person would do anywhere and said, oh, no, you're not. There is no way in the world that we are sending you to a dangerous place in the Middle East. God did dramatic stuff to change everybody's mind, and we ended up going. And while we had these kids in dangerous Jordan, 3 bombs went off in the London subways. Now if I had told our committee that we wanted to go to London, they wouldn't have even blinked their eyes. London, that's a safe place. No, it's really not. It's like no place is really totally safe. And at the same time, 99.9% of the time, the places that we go in the world are normal and not dangerous at all. So it shows them that the world is a place that they can care about and function in. Number 5 reason that missions are important to kids is because God really wants a generation God really wants us to understand that our Christian responsibilities are to the world. Not just to ourselves, not just to our family, not just to our church, but to the whole world. And until they see parts of the world that aren't their neighborhood, they can't understand that. So, 5 reasons why mission is important to kids. Does anybody have questions at this point? What I love is telling groups of people stuff that they already know, because I don't feel responsible for getting it wrong. So, let's continue on.
Say kids. Can
Okay.
you describe
Yeah.
the ages?
Kids, generally right now, I'm talking teenagers. So I'm talking about the age of 12 to about probably 21. So that's generally what I work with. Here in the U.S., generally, adolescence is about 10 years from about 12 to 21. And you won't normally have people older than 18 in a youth group. So they'll have a group that counts for college, and they hit about 21 or 22, and they're considered adults.
Whereas youth in Uganda go up to 35 years.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Generally until people get married. Is that right?
Yeah, well, yes.
Okay.
When they get married, because you may get married when you are 20
Okay.
or when you are 25, but you still be called a youth.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. It's very different and very in different cultures. But here we pretty much go by our school system. And so when people
At university, I have 4,000 people, so those are actually youth.
Yeah. Okay.
They are below 25. Yes.
Okay. 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 Yeah. So, right. Most of my experience is here. So, yeah. When you hear kid, I'm talking pretty much junior high, high school, college, so up to about 22.
So when you visit Uganda and you say a kid, they are thinking of someone you are just holding.
Oh. Okay. 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 So it would go. So kid is small child, and then youth goes up to about 35.
Yes.
Okay. Where does youth start? About 12. Okay. So basically about puberty.
There is an overlap there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let's turn around and ask the other question. We've talked about why missions is important to kids. Let's talk about, to young people. Let's talk about why young people is important for missions. The first and most important issue is the question of who's going to go, right? And so my college friends right now that are in their middle 50s and have big houses and expensive cars and jobs where they've got a lot of responsibility and a big paycheck, there's no way in the world that they're going to pull up stakes and they're going to move to, name your foreign country. Not because they're bad people, but because they have so much of their life invested in where they are. On the other hand, the 17 and 18-year-olds that I work with in my youth group at church, they don't have that huge pile of stuff holding them down. And they're in a place where they can really think about changing the course of their lives to include something like missions. One of the things that we're hearing more and more from long-term mission sending agencies is that the candidates that they're getting heard the call to the missions field in short-term trips when they were in high school and college. God is doing something dramatic there, and it makes a lot of sense that we want to focus energy on telling young people about missions. The second thing is that God has consistently used young people to change the world. And you look at Bible stories, you have stuff like King Josiah, right? Josiah becomes the king of Israel at the age of 17, turns the country around, turns the country back to the God of Abraham. You have stories in the New Testament about how Mary was probably about 14. Now, I got to say, as a career youth guy, the thought of a 14-year-old having a baby is really frightening and uncomfortable to me. But God used young people to change the world.
All the disciples were under 21.
Yeah.
Most of them were teens.
That's right. Probably in their teens when Jesus grabbed hold of their hearts. And so you look at, like the Gospels, right? Written by John. Now, John didn't write the Gospel as a teenager. He wrote it after a whole career of ministry, but the change, the thing that happened in his heart that put his life on that path happened when he was in his teenage years. And so right now, as you're ministering to young people, as you're working with youth, you've got to understand that God can use you to put this kind of seed into the life of a young person that might not yield fruit for, 20, 30, 40 years. Okay, so then, if we're going to talk about how important kids are to missions, there should be some evidence, right? We should be able to look back and see how stuff that God did through kids led to dramatic missions movements. And what a coincidence, it turns out that there are a lot. How many people have ever heard of the haystack movement? Anybody? Okay, probably at some point somebody on the podium at the conference will talk about the haystack movement. Basically, the thing that happened was there was revival going on in the country, and there were a group of young people that were meeting to pray at a university. At some point after a prayer meeting, a bunch of them were walking back to class, huge rainstorm hit, and they hid under a haystack. And in this haystack, they decided, what the heck, we've been praying, and started to pray again. The Spirit of the Lord fell. They ended up absolutely convinced that they were being called to dedicate themselves to reaching the nations for Jesus. And over the next decades, hundreds of young people went out to be full-time missionaries all over the place from England. Really dramatic stuff. Now, the cool part is that the stuff that came out of this haystack meeting is still bearing fruit. So there are organizations that started out of this movement that we still know about and hear about, like the American Bible Society. American Bible Society was started out of this movement. Okay, so the student volunteer movement, about 1885. Same kind of deal, 251 students in Mount Hermon gather to pray about world missions. 100 of them end up committing themselves to world missions. Over the next 30 years, thousands and thousands and thousands of college-age young people dedicated themselves to missions and spent their lives doing that. Again, organizations that we still know about have got roots that somehow came out of this. For instance, InterVarsity. How many of you guys are familiar with the Urbana? Okay, so yeah, so Urbana is exactly based on this kind of model. You see God doing amazing things through young people. Youth with a Mission, started by a guy named Loren Cunningham. So now Loren Cunningham is, 50, 60 years old. He's got probably the largest mission agency in the world, and it started when God gave him a mission, when God gave him a vision while he was traveling in the Bahamas. So the vision was a picture of the world with waves crashing on all the shores, and when the waves crashed, they'd turn into young people that were going throughout the countries. And right now, there's almost not a nation on earth that has not been affected by the stuff that God has done through this man. God does dramatic things through kids, and the kids that you are involved with, He wants to do dramatic things through. So our job is to try to get them into the presence of God, get them to places where God is operating, and see what He does. Now, the fourth reason that kids are important to missions is because it's a lot easier to teach a kid to support missions than it is to teach a 50-year-old to support missions. So I said I was working in the nonprofit. I've been raising support for 20 years. A lot of the people that support me were my former youth group kids. So where did they learn? How did they learn to support people like that? Because I would regularly tell them, someday you're going to need to send me checks every month. I just made sure they knew. They learned how to support me as a missionary when they went on short-term trips in their high school career. So they'd go on a mission trip. They'd have to raise money by sending out support letters. And it's so interesting, right? And they have the experience of going, oh God, how am I going to raise $1,000 for this trip? And seeing the Lord provide through His saints. You learn that lesson, and it becomes perfectly normal then to expect that when you get a letter like that, you're going to pray about it and you're going to respond. Now, the cool thing is that I know I'm not the only one that a lot of my former kids support, because a lot of their friends now are missionaries all over the place. And I know that my former kids have got this community that started 30 years ago that they're still a part of, where we were raising up senders. We were raising up people who send regular checks to missionaries to make that happen. Almost nobody talks about that, but that is a crucial part of doing mission trips with young people, is teaching them how to support missions for later on in their lives. Okay, so is this being helpful at all? I know we're going, okay, because, yeah, okay, then we'll keep on going. Has anybody got questions at this point?
I guess I have a question on your last point. If, as an adult, I think I'm an adult yet now, if you've never done the fundraising, I guess we would have to find other people that have actually done the fundraising to be able to talk with our youth about how to do the fundraising. I mean,
Okay.
we've never really, I mean, we went to China, we didn't do much fundraising at all because we had never done it.
Okay.
So, you know, I guess that's what you'd have to do.
That would be a helpful thing. I plan to spend, if you're interested, a good part of this workshop talking about that,
Okay.
because that's something that I'm really passionate about.
Sounds great.
Okay, so let me go ahead and separate missions from poverty. I think that this is really important. It's really easy for us to think that missions is about working with the poor. So if I'm working with the poor, I must be doing missions. And I have friends come up to me all the time talking about the wonderful time that their kids had on the mission trip to the inner city of Chicago. And I think that that is fine, okay? I'm not saying anything wrong in the world with that. Last summer, I took a group of teenagers to inner city Houston to work with homeless people. I tell you what, if you're going to be homeless, Houston is the place to do it. They have so many ministries. We were ministering to these homeless people in 108-degree downtown Houston, and they're all wearing clean, freshly pressed clothes. And, you know, it's like, finally, I had to ask. You know, this is sort of awkward for me to ask, but why are your clothes so clean? And it turned out that there are ministries all over Houston that wash and clean clothes for homeless people. And isn't that crazy? And it's like I actually had people say that. Yeah, if you're going to be homeless, this is the place to do it. Anyway, all of that to say, nothing in the world wrong with doing trips to help poor people. But helping poor people isn't discipling the nations. Okay? Two completely different commands. Yes, God commanded us to help the poor, but God also commanded us to disciple the nations. And sometimes the two intersect. Sometimes I can take my kids to the dump and we can do poor and we can do the nations at the same time. But that's not always true. And we've got to understand that they're both required for our kids to come into the fullness of what God has for them. My example, and I love telling this example because it makes me laugh. It's as though we were to think that it's okay as a community to fulfill all the commands of God. And that makes a certain sense. You know, isn't it wonderful that as a group we can come together, and because some of us have got certain gifts and some of us have got other gifts, all together we fulfill the commandments of God. That sounds really good, right? And so the cool thing for me is that all of y'all are so faithful to your spouses. And so you fulfill that commandment, because I just really can't hack that very well. And knowing that y'all are faithful to your spouses means that I can concentrate on my ministry of not stealing. And so I have the gift of not stealing, but it's okay for me to cheat on my spouse because you guys are so faithful to yours. Anybody believe the gospel works that way? No, of course not. Right, it's two completely different commands. Take care of the poor, but also go to the nations. Okay, so that little soapbox is done. I'm setting it aside. I'm moving on. Is it worth me talking about how to set up a mission program in a parish?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, right. Okay, good. Then this is for you. Okay, so... Okay, and you. Okay, so you too. Okay. So, how to set up a mission program in your church. So we'll go through some mechanics, and then we'll talk about funding, because that's always a big issue. And then we'll talk about how you convince leadership and parents that it's an okay thing to do. Okay, number one step to setting up a missions program in the ministry that you're involved in is this: get your own house in order. Before you start a missions program, you need to get to the place where you can honestly say, "Here I am, Lord, send me anywhere you want." Where you can honestly say, "Lord God, I am willing to give up everything to go wherever you want me to go." And once you've done that, you know it's time to set up a mission program when you hear God say, "You are exactly where I want you." Now, the struggle that it takes to go through that process will end up doing more for the eventual success of a mission program than anything else that you can do. So that's how you start. You go to God and you say, God, is it supposed to be me that's going to the mission field, or do you want me here mobilizing others? Number 2 thing for setting up a mission program is to understand that a big part of your ministry, one of the most important goals of your ministry, is going to be to produce missionaries. And if God is calling us to the nations, one of the services that we do for the church is by providing people that our senders can send. So something to think about. Number 3 thing that you do, especially if your church has never done this before, is, oh my goodness, you pray. I mean, you pray and you fast and you say, God, I want to do this and I want to put this in your hands. And understand, if your church has never done this before, there will be an unbelievable amount of demonic resistance to making it happen. Now, the demonic resistance, I mean, you know, it's probably not going to have people having huge car wrecks and meteorites hitting the church and stuff. But what you're going to have is a lot of well-meaning people who say, oh, no, no, no. You know, we don't want to do that. We don't want, oh, that's far too high a liability for the church to carry. Oh, no, why spend so much money? It would be better to just send the money to the people in Southeast Asia. You know, oh, no, no, no. There are poor people here that we can deal with. And so you need to be praying into this thing that God wants to do, and praying for favor and letting people outside your church know that you think this is something that God is calling your church to, so that they can start to make stuff happen in the heavenly realm. It's so funny. I say so much brilliant stuff, and I can't remember if I said it in this workshop or the other one. Okay, so you get people to pray. The next thing you do is you go to your church leadership. And you say, church leadership, I really believe that this is something that God is calling us to. And you make your case. I mean, go prepared, you know, and be able to make the case and tell them why it's important for the kids. And here's a trick for dealing with church leadership and dealing with parents, is everybody that's responsible for kids is worried about the sense of entitlement and worried about how tied up they are with material things. And if you can offer a solution to that problem, they will be very open to the possibility of sending your kids into places where that can be broken. So talk to your church leadership and then say the magic words. Here are the magic words. The magic words are, I'll do all the work. As soon as your rector hears that, your rector will say, okay. It's like, I'm willing to get behind this. Now, one of the interesting things is that the reason that rectors really do this, here I'm telling you, like one of those secrets. This is like a clergy secret that y'all aren't supposed to know. And I'm going to tell you, but you can't tell where you heard it. One of the things that we are desperately afraid of is you leaving. We are aware that pretty much we run a volunteer organization. And if you really want to do something and we make you mad in the way we handle it, we're afraid you're going to leave, so we're going to say yes. If it looks like we're not going to say yes, you can just drop the leaving card. I didn't say that. You did not hear that here. Okay, so anyway, talk to your church leadership. Let them know that you're passionate about it to make it happen. Then the next important step then is to find somebody to go with. So we're going to talk about good organizations in just a second, but there are a couple of things that you need to think about. One is to start praying and saying, okay, God, now we're to the point that I want to know where to go. Where do you want to send me? Amazing how often the Lord answers that prayer in ways that are really surprising. So start to pray that prayer and start to think about what kind of trip you want to go on. There are lots of different kinds of short-term ministry trips that you can do. There are house building trips. Pretty much on a house building trip, you take kids over and you're working on something, but you're not having a lot of interaction with the families around you. It's really good for sort of a first sample mission trip. Those are the kinds of things that Gateway Mission Training Center does. So I worked for those guys for about 7 years, and I would recommend what the guy named Dan Klooster does. There are other kind of trips where you go in to do like evangelism. YWAM is really good for doing performance evangelism trips. So you go in to do a YWAM trip and you're going to be canvassing neighborhoods and saying, we're doing a program out in the park, come watch us. Great if you got a lot of kids that really like performance stuff, that really like dance, that kind of stuff. Lots of times people will do VBS trips, Vacation Bible School. You know, same way that you do Vacation Bible School in your church, you just take it on the road. And you know, same kind of thing. The really good thing about Vacation Bible trips is they're really highly interactional. You know, your kids come home having made friendships with children from these other countries, which has, you know, a very powerful effect. People do medical mission trips. It's usually harder to get teenagers involved in medical trips unless your teenagers are, you know, have medical degrees and stuff. But lots of times they will take people to do that. I thought that was funny. Nobody thought that was funny? Okay, kind of funny. Okay, tell you what, when I make a joke, if you guys would just give me like a score. Okay, it's like, it doesn't have to be big. Okay, good. Is that a 30?
No, that's a 0.
I will interpret the score myself. Thank you very much. Okay, so you find a group, a good way to find a group that will, okay, let me back up a little bit. The fortunate thing about being 50 years into this major thing that God is doing is there are lots of organizations that do turnkey mission trips. And so if you are interested in taking your church on a trip, there are really good groups that know exactly how to walk you through that. Now, on your little flyer that I just passed out, the place where it says New Wineskins for Global Mission August 2013, it says groups that lead turnkey trips. Does everybody see that? Okay, it really doesn't matter if you see it or not because I'm going to talk all the way through it. So you could have saved time by just leaving your flyer on the floor. Okay, I'm giving myself a 4 for that. YWAM, Youth with a Mission. The organization, is this a question? Yes. Ask the question. No. Oh, you had your, I didn't know if your pen in your hand. Okay. Okay. Okay, that's another rule that we need to talk about. Anytime your hand goes higher than your ear, it's a question. And you are perilously close, Steve. I just said that, you know, okay, right there.
I'm giving you 3.
Okay. Okay. You know, there's a real consistency here. Youth with a Mission grew from this vision that Lauren Cunningham had in the Bahamas until they probably have got some kind of YWAM base in almost every country on the planet. And the cool thing is that YWAM was born out of short-term mission trips and is set up to handle short-term mission trips pretty much everywhere. So the first thing we do when we feel like God is sending us to some particular country is get on the internet, find out where the YWAM base is, and contact them and say, this is what we're thinking. Can you handle something like this? Almost always they say yes, because this is what they do. Highly recommend YWAM. Now they've got some sort of canned mission programs like YWAM Mission Adventure. So they've got some sort of first level mission trips that they'll come and they'll do, you know, 300 kids at a time. Good program, heard really good things about it. And it's helpful at this point to say that I am not making any guarantees about these groups. And you never really know. You know, no group does perfectly. And there are horror stories about some bad groups. And there are also horror stories that happen with some good groups. And so a lot of deciding where you're going to go has to do with communicating with people, deciding if you trust them. And I would recommend that you always get recommendations. You know, always say, tell me somebody else who's worked with your group, and call them and find out how stuff went. There are also a number of mission agencies that have already put together mission trips that they're just looking for people to go on. So YWAM does that. SAMS does that. Steve right now is working on a trip to Borneo that's like that. So he's looking for people to go. Those are helpful things sometimes to take your kids on. How many people have heard of Group Magazine? Okay, it's like they've been doing youth ministry resources for probably the last 40 years, and as a youth minister, it's pretty much required that you subscribe to the magazine. I think in the 30 years that I've been taking Group Magazine, I may have opened one about 5 times. But anyway, they also do work camps for kids, and they call group work camps, and I've heard really good things about them. Most of the trips that they do are in the continental U.S., but they do trips that are overseas also. Gateway Mission Training Center I talked about. Dan Klooster, the guy that leads that, is here. I think those trips are just about perfect for a church that's moving into short-term missions for the first time, because they do house building right across the border from El Paso and Juarez. So you land on the plane, they pick you up in a 15-passenger van, and 10 minutes later, you're in Juarez, Mexico. They've got stuff set up with churches. They've got, it's absolutely turnkey. And they will even lead your evaluation and debrief stuff at night if you want them to. Yeah.
Is that available to any church throughout the U.S.?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah, just call up Dan and say, I want to bring a group, and he'll say when, and you can find a time.
And I just want to add to, because you're talking about groups, and I've used, my favorite one is World Servants.
Okay.
I've used them a bunch of times, phenomenal. I've done the work group one. I mean, they're great, they're phenomenal. I just didn't like their style because they want you to interact with all your kids, like split your kids up and go.
Okay, right, with other kids, yeah.
And I didn't like that at all. I like when my kids stay together and, working together. But World Servants also does, they like to have parts of the older kids go out into the community that they're working at and evangelize and work. And you're working on somebody's house usually, and you have an opportunity to evangelize to them as well. So I really appreciate World Servants.
Okay.
Just my personal passing.
No, sure. Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, yeah. And if anybody else has got groups that they've worked with, then really good. I mean, bring it up. So anyway, these are good places to go. World Servants. But you want to get somebody that you can trust. You want to get somebody that does a good job of communicating with you. And that has been an issue working with YWAM sometimes, but we don't really need to go into that.
Sometimes going directly to the bishops in these countries. When I went to Dominican Republic, I worked directly with Bishop Abini.
Okay.
And it was very effective.
Okay.
And, he connected us with missionaries he had in there. And that was a really good situation.
That is a really good point, and one that I yeah, it's happening more and more. It's happening because, with all the stuff that the American Anglican Church has gotten, the trouble we've gotten into, we're opening up communication between people in, Nigeria and Southeast Asia and everywhere, and there are a lot of people, the connections you can make through the Anglican Church that are perfect for that. That's a really good, it's a really good example.
This past October, I met Bishop Christian in Dinabad, India, Gujarat, India, and he's really open to that kind of thing. And any kind of training, like if you have teams in your church, you could pair the two together and bring them.
Okay. Okay. A sort of a warning, something to be careful of. One of the things that happened when the short-term missions movement started taking off was at first all the long-term mission sending agencies just hated it. That's like they're recruiting people that have got master's degrees and going through months of pre-field training, and then you got all these 14 and 15-year-old teenage kids going into the countries, and they're going, oh, this is just wrong. As they started to realize that God was really doing powerful things through those teenagers, their minds started to change, and they started to feel like, hey, we don't want to be left out. And so a lot of long-term sending agencies started offering trips. Now the problem was the only people that they had to host those trips was their long-term missionaries. And most of the time, long-term missionaries are not set up to handle, 15 or 20 high school kids showing up. And so generally what you want to be real careful of is you want to be real careful of ministries that want to connect you to long-term missionaries. Usually what you want are people who will connect you to local churches. Right? I mean, normally it's churches that are set up with the roots in a neighborhood to be able to take advantage of what it is that your group goes and does. So sort of as a warning, had bad experiences with long-term missionaries, and organizations that are really keyed to work with short-term groups usually do a better job.
And they have a mission for you.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
Yeah, because you sort of fit into their master plan. They've got neighborhoods that they want to visit, and send in, a bunch of your kids in there to do stuff is really helpful for them. At this point then, yeah. No, it's above the ear. Yeah, it is. No, there's a line that goes from about here. See, that's arguable. Okay. I'm gonna give you a pass this time. Okay, so at this point then, that's right. I guess we could vote. I guess we could do democratic stuff. So what I want to do then is talk about the two biggest blocks to making short-term missions happen in your church. One of them is funding, and another one is worried parents. So let's go ahead and let's talk about funding first. Rule number one for how to fund your short-term missions is to understand that God pays for what He calls. I mean, bottom line, it's like God calls people to go stuff and He supplies the money for them to do it. I've been doing this for, years and years and years, and I have never had a trip not make financially. And I had just some, stunning things happen. One year, we were taking a bunch of kids, I don't remember where. We were in Pittsburgh, and I think we were taking them down into Mexico, and hadn't done a very good job of administration. Showed up, ready to go on the trip, and 3 kids didn't show up. 3 kids that we counted on, which meant that we were short by about $4,000 of what we were supposed to pay the people that were taking us on the trip. Sat down with the kids, prayed, and said, is this a sign that God is telling us not to go? Or are we supposed to go and see if we can raise money because we've got to have it by tomorrow? The kids prayed, and of course they decided that they still wanted to go. Got on the phone with aunts and uncles and friends, and we raised $4,000 in less than 24 hours. There is this amazing thing that God does where it's sort of like He anoints people in such a way that people want to give Him money. And I'm being absolutely serious. This is not a joke. But we had stuff happen like I was actually at Trinity School for Ministry at that point, and we had people that were involved in the trip walk through the office and actually have professors come out of their office and say, I heard you guys were looking for money, let me write you a check. It was just absolutely bizarre. We had, okay, never mind, I won't even tell that story. Yeah, sorry. So anyway, God pays for this stuff. So don't be afraid. Generally, and this is, I really feel strongly about this, generally if you're going to do short-term missions, you want to raise most of your money by writing letters. And just bottom line, absolutely that's what you want to do. And you want to do it for a couple of reasons. One, because that's the way that real missionaries are going to work. Have I already made the real missionaries don't do bake sales joke? Okay, okay, I did that. Okay, so bottom line, it's like real missionaries work by contacting supporters and having them give money. They don't work for their trips. It's not like they go out and do car washes to raise the $125,000 it takes to keep them on the field. You're not going to have one of your church's missionaries come and say, I need you to help me raise $100,000, so we're going to do a big bake sale. $1,000 a cookie. They're really good cookies. It's like that's not the way it works. If we want to teach our kids how missions really works, we get them to write letters. Now, most of this flyer has to do with how you set up a funding program in your church. A big part of this is education. Bottom line, a big part of it is education, because as soon as you tell parents that you want your kids to go on this multi-$1,000 trip, and you want them to write letters, all the parents are going to go, I don't want my kid to look like a beggar. And you have to educate them. And you have to be able to talk about the Apostle Paul, who raised money from other communities to do ministry. That it's a biblical thing. You want to make sure that parents understand that mission trips are not fun trips, they're work trips. When parents say, I don't want to feed that sense of entitlement that I'm worried about, so my kids have to work for whatever they go on, you talk about how the trip is a work trip. And that digging 5 miles of 18-inch trench through the jungle is hard work. When I got to the church that I'm at now, which is actually the church that Megan came from, and started doing mission trips with the kids, I had to put this article in our bulletin. And I do it once every few years. And the title is Real Missionaries Don't Do Bake Sales. You've got to educate people to be able to make this work.
Well, I want to ask you, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
She was faster than
okay, sorry, okay.
The biggest thing that I would say with that is that you have to teach kids, and mostly parents, not so much the kids because they all understand it, we're going to parents, is that you're giving people an opportunity, others, to be a part of something that they can't do. There are a lot of people, when we took our kids on mission trips, that could never go on a mission trip. They were in wheelchairs, they had all kinds of problems, health problems, And it was like, they kind of felt at that point, like life had passed them by for that opportunity. But you say, no, you're an important part of that.
Yeah.
And you get the whole congregation fired up about, A, you can pray, you can help in any kind of giving that you can give, and whatever you give, God multiplies. And you know, and when we come back, you know, this will be as much your mission trip as it was our mission trip.
So have Constance come and talk at your church. Okay?
And that's what I wanted to ask you basically the same question, because I took for years the exact, my kids would have loved you, because I took the exact opposite tack.
And made them work for it?
I made them all work for
Okay.
it. Because my church, most of the parents could have just easily just wrote them a check for $1,000 or $1,200, and that'd been it. And then I'd have kids that parents couldn't do that. So for years, I mean, we raked leaves, we did, you know, we did everything. We had snow removal teams.
In Fort Worth? Oh, no, you're not in Fort Worth. Okay.
No.
Okay,
This is
yeah.
in Virginia. And, yeah, snow in Fort Worth. No, we had good. But, you know, we did spaghetti dinner
Right.
things for the big church, and we raised money, and then you split it by the hours that you worked. And then you could only raise a small percentage. I did the, you know, write letters to aunts and uncles, but that couldn't be the major percentage. You had to work for it. So why? Because I thought that was important, that they had to work to go, they had to feel like they took ownership of their mission trip. You know?
Yeah.
And why, I mean, I'm just kind of curious, because you're basically saying, well, everything I did was then completely, you know.
Yeah, probably completely wrong. Those kids are all probably going to go to hell.
Yeah, they probably are. They're all screwed up now because they had me. They're a youth leader for years. But what is, you know, why isn't that a good philosophy?
You
I'm
want them to
just
think
curious.
like a missionary right from the get-go.
Yeah, 'cause
And a
my kids-
missionary doesn't do that.
Well, I know, but my kids were, you know, I have a little different philosophy on sending my kids on a mission.
Sure, and okay, and understand, it's like, I mean, there are different ways to do this and different ways to look at this, and a lot of people will do that. I have generally felt like most of that is coming from parents that need education. And so I've sort of decided that this is a hill that I'm going to die on. A lot of people do mainly fundraisers to make mission trips work, and there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah, I just had this.
I just want to be like, if there's something really wrong, if there's a
Okay, the
better
only
reason
thing,
why,
the only reason that it is better to have them do letters is because that's the way the real mission world works. And so if what I've taught them is, if you're going on a mission trip, you have to work to make it happen. And, you know, the missionary that wants to go to Borneo comes to church and says, you know, help me go to Borneo. For the rest of their lives, they're going to be doing, you know, well, how are you working to make that happen? So I'm not saying it's bad for kids. That does really address a serious problem with our kids, and that's the sense of entitlement. And so I would say that there's nothing wrong with that. I would just say that the kingdom of God is better served when we're dealing with missions by teaching people to operate like real missionaries work. So, you know, I mean, it's just, if you were doing the workshop, I would be totally okay with you saying you should make your kids work. But in general, I think that there are better ways to do it.
You know, the ability, or where I was at, you know, they can write letters to grandmas and all that, but, you know, mommy and daddy at the end of the day was just going to write a check for what, because they want their kids to go on a mission trip.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's the other thing. It's like, you know, the environment that you're in is going to, there are always different trade-offs. And you make a decision based on what's best for the kids that you're with. So yeah, so my only argument in favor of doing letters would be that it's the way that most of the mission world works. And so we're preparing kids to support missionaries later.
And I do have to say, you changed my philosophy already being in here, because I've never looked at going on mission trips as training kids to be missionaries.
Okay,
I did it for the exact opposite, you know, teaching them to see the world in a different light.
Let me tell you that we had kids that mom and dad would write a check, they still had to write 20 letters. They had to send 20 letters to somebody because it wasn't about the money. It was about giving somebody else the opportunity to be a part. They were sharing this joy.
And I mean, honestly, it's kind of mean, but there is something that needs to be broken in the hearts of American parents. You know, that think that they've got enough money to just be able to make anything happen. Exactly. It's like there's a way that it is hard for our parents to understand their dependence upon God. So anyway, I'm with you. We do fundraisers also for our trips, and there have been trips when we've just done fundraisers, but I'm a big believer in letters. So, Okay, so, okay, good. Talk to your vestry, talk to your outreach committee. It used to be in the Episcopal Church, when I was in the Episcopal Church, that the diocesan office always had a pool of money that somebody had set aside for missions that had never been used. And so if you've got a diocesan structure, it's really worth knocking on those doors and putting some of that money to good use. Let me say one more thing about fundraising, and then we'll move on. And just to echo something that Constance said, our God is a generous giving God. And God is crazy generous. And as He touches people's hearts, they find themselves wanting to give and wanting to give well. To have you come up as a person that they trust and say, here's a good place that you could put the money that God is moving you to give, is a blessing to the people that need to give money. And if you can go into the whole fundraising thing thinking, I am honoring God and ministering to these people by giving them a place to put their money to good use in the kingdom of God, it's a huge thing. Yeah.
Do you put all the money into a pool, or does it just go for each individual kid? And then what happens if they get to their mark? Or do you make it to, like, because you were talking earlier about, well, the 3 kids dropped out and we were short 4,000. So do you put all the money into a pool, or do you just have each individual kid count their money, and once they reach a limit, how does that work?
Generally, we do both. So we tell the kids they're responsible for raising, $1,000. If they raise more than that, then that money goes to fill the kids that haven't filled out all their money. And we always have, a couple of outliers that raise a lot of extra and a lot that don't make it, and it's always, matched up. One of the legal issues is that if you've written a letter and said, we're going to use money for this mission trip, it all has to go to the mission trip, or it has to go back to the donor. So I would recommend in this form, at least this is in the U.S., that in this form, the back 2 pages are Stephen's theology and practical tips on raising money, and one of them is my support letter. If you're sending out a support letter, always say, if we have extra money, it will go to this purpose. So we will give it to the church we're ministering to, we will give it to this organization, we will buy iPads for the youth leaders. Just make sure that you say something about what you're going to do with it, because if you don't and you have extra money, you've got to send that back to your supporters.
If you look at this in the beginning, when you're starting to get a mission deal going on in your church, look at the long-range thing, because what we were looking at was not just a one-shot trip. Mm-hmm. It was like, okay, where would we go after this trip? Mm-hmm. How do you take the gospel to somebody, and keep going? Because most trips that we got way more money than what we needed. Mm-hmm. And we then were able to tell the people, now here's phase 2. Mm-hmm. And this is what we're going to do after it.
Yeah.
And I think it takes some planning and looking at it. Don't look at it as a one-shot deal. Because you open up God a lot bigger if you do that.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, it's good to have a long-term plan, and it's great when churches end up establishing a relationship with, some place in another country. So there are relationships that are built up there over time. People start to look forward to it. Junior high kids go, I can't wait until I'm in 10th grade and can go on the youth group mission trip. So really good, if you can make those kind of connections.
Do you recommend, because I heard this and I always follow this, do you recommend going back to the same place pretty much, like if you build a relationship somewhere, going back constantly, or do you recommend going someplace new all the time?
I recommend sitting down every year with your kids and praying, God, where are you sending us? And if you absolutely don't hear anything, then go someplace that you've gone before. I think in general, it's better to have a place that you continually go. God has never let me do that. Stephen's opinion versus God's opinion. I would say, go to the same place. Evidently, God doesn't want me to do that.
Well, no, I never did that either, so I was always told never go to the same place.
Really?
Yeah.
How interesting. Why?
I don't know why either. I just follow what I know.
Okay, just what everybody says. So you'll just do everything I tell you to do anyway. Okay, good. Okay.
You're starting off in ministry, and you're reading this stuff, and you go to these, and one guy says, never do that. Well, he's there.
Okay, how interesting. Yeah, because I've heard really good things about groups that do that. And it seemed, yeah, so I don't know.
To me, it seemed more logical to get hooked up and be connected with the group, that they can get connected every year and see
Yeah.
people and excited about going back.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so next question, how to sell it to church leadership and parents. And just real quickly, we got like 5 more minutes and we're done. So can you guys hold on for 5 more minutes? Is everybody good for 5 more minutes? Okay, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you up. Somebody get him some coffee. Okay, so a couple of things that help when you're breaking a church in. If you've been doing your praying, if you've talked to the church leadership and they're behind it, a couple of things that are really valuable. Parents are worried about the safety of their kids. So you want to do stuff right off the bat. You want to have lots of adults involved. Generally, when we're going outside the borders of the country, I try to take about 1 adult for every 3 kids. So I want to have a really high ratio of adults to kids. I want to have stuff set up so that the group can have problems and me as the leader not have to be involved in it. So generally what I will do is I use the King's Kids Ministry in YWAM has got this really nice 5-fold leadership structure. And so I will pass out the jobs to other people that are going with me so that I end up with all the authority and none of the responsibility. So it is if something catastrophic happens, I'm free to be able to deal with that. And I would really recommend that as you're setting up trips. Very helpful for parents' sake to take a nurse or doctor. Find somebody in your congregation that's got some medical expertise to do that, because that is always one of the things that parents are concerned about. Because all they hear about the world is tsunamis and suicide bombs and all this kind of stuff. And to be able to say, no, this is a safe place, we've got a nurse or a doctor involved, really helps a lot. I would recommend that if you're going someplace, before you even tell parents about it, go to Google, talk to the people that you're setting up the trip with, and figure out where the nearest hospital is. Basically there are first world hospitals all over the world. And to be able to say, it turns out that we're 10 minutes car ride from a hospital where this doctor was trained at, name a medical school, is amazingly helpful for parents to hear. So think about that early in the process. Important to have insurance. There are companies that sell short-term mission insurance that not only will pay for that kind of stuff for like $1 a day, but will airlift people out if they need it. Absolutely worth doing that and letting parents know that that's part of the trip. If you can find somebody from wherever you're going to who's lived there who can come and talk to your parents, that's absolutely a gold mine. When we took the kids to Jordan, it turned out that we had an MK, a missionary kid who had grown up there, who could come and talk to our group about what it was like to grow up there. Very helpful for parents to see that there was somebody that lived outside the borders of the country that didn't die there. So you want to tell parents and the vestry how good this is going to be for their kids. So steal all of my ideas that I went through and just claim like you thought them up. Just play like that. You don't have to give me credit at all. It's very helpful when you're starting to advertise for the trip to have an itinerary from the very beginning, so that parents aren't left with sort of no idea of how this is going to look. Now, of course, once you get out there, nothing's going to work the way that it's supposed to. And that's fine. It's fine to say we're going to spend Tuesday and Wednesday building a house, and then we're going to go to this little community and it being completely twisted around. Parents aren't going to be going, my child just emailed me and the itinerary says you're building a house, I want my kid home now. But that really, just seeing what they're going to be doing helps a whole lot. Okay. Let me say one more thing, and then I will open up the floor for any last questions. One of the things that's really helpful in your church is to sort of build up a tradition of having missionaries come and talk. Now, for churches that are far along and have got missionaries that they're supporting, whenever the missionary comes back, make sure that they're talking to the congregation, that they're talking to your youth group, have a special meeting and have parents come. For those of us that have got churches that are not involved in missions, find missionaries coming to visit a church around you. Call any Baptist church. Okay, call any Baptist church. And don't tell them you're an Anglican, because then they'll try to lead you to Jesus. So call any Anglican church, any Baptist church, and say, when you've got a missionary coming, can they come and talk to my kids? very powerful thing to do for your kids and for your adults. Okay, at this point, I think I'm pretty well done. So has anybody got anything comment they want to make, question they want to ask?
Well, I mean, this is really one of the reasons why I came in. Maybe there's two different segments to this, and you didn't really kind of touch, but it was for developing global vision in youth ministry, and then part of it talks about what you did, but talks videos, activities, and games.
I saw that on there.
Oh,
Yeah.
I saw that.
Because I was like, well, the mission part was part of it because it said using short-term missions for maximum impact.
I need to be honest and say I have no idea who wrote that.
Oh, okay.
And I was surprised when I read it this morning and discovered that I was going to be doing games and
Well, no, I was
videos and
figuring
that
like
kind of
talking
stuff.
about using videos and activity and what are the other games and stuff for helping and, enhance the world vision of our
Right.
developing into our kids.
Okay, tell you what, then there's another section that I didn't do that's more about that. And if you're
Okay.
willing to listen to me for about 3 more minutes after everybody's gone, I'll be happy to talk
No,
about
I'm
that.
just kind of curious, I mean, because that's what
That's what you were interested in. So I've just wasted an hour and 15 minutes of your time. Okay, the story of my life. Anybody else have any questions? Yes. Remix.
Where's Lambden? So I can go talk with you
Lambden
about it.
is
They have registered.
directly north of the place where we're meeting. So if you go straight up the hill, you'll see Lambden. I think. Check a map.
No,
Don't trust me.
I think you're probably wrong, but
Okay. What is with this workshop? Everybody thinks I'm wrong. What?
Oh, now that's one thing. Let's all score that.
I can ask you questions here about this, but wait till everybody else is finished with the questions here.
Okay.
I'd like to know more about your super seminar and
Okay.
that.
Okay, it's going to be brilliant.
I know. I know
sort of
that.
basics of youth ministry.
I just got an introduction to it.
Okay,
right now.
that's
I
right. That's right.
understand.
Okay. Okay, well then let me go ahead and pray to close. And anybody who wants to stay and hear me do 3 or 4 more minutes of other ways to raise mission awareness that don't have to do with going out on the mission field. The reason that I didn't talk about any of that stuff is because compared to taking your kids outside the country, it's just noise. It's like the experience of going outside the country is so powerful that it just almost doesn't make any sense to do the rest of this stuff. But it's great stuff. So, okay, so let me close with a prayer. Everybody can leave and we'll talk about that. So, Jesus, thank you for the time. And I want to pray what I started with. Oh, Lord God, please make us better at the things we do for you. I pray that you would pour out your Spirit on the people here. I pray, Father God, that out of the hearts of these people and their desire for you would come powerful missions programs in the churches that they're involved in. So anoint us, Lord God, and lead us. And let us see you do powerful things with our kids. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you all very much for putting up with me. Your time's done, you're free.
So those who have teams, please, you are invited to Uganda.
Okay.
Yes.
Honestly,
Yes.
can you give people your name and number and your email address?
Yes, I'll do that.
Oh, perfect, okay. And I'd actually like one of those too. Thank you.
We found Lambden.